Thank you, Doctor, on that. I want us to look a bit into some of your vast experience, especially looking at your consulting for the World Bank, and looking at most of these, when it boils down to how Islamic finance as well is beginning to open up in new markets. Recently, you were in Azerbaijan, organized by the ISDB. We see new markets opening up. We see Ghana just last month. They released the first Islamic bank, which was licensed, and other markets too in the Central Asia, for example. These markets that are opening up, they are also faced with potential challenges. Some of them are underestimated, but from your perspective, dealing with different markets with different combinations. When I say combination, I mean markets that are minority Muslim in nature, or markets that are stark conventional finance in nature. These are new frontiers. So the challenges that they face, most of the time, underestimating some of the major problems which they may feel may be navigated within short period of time. What will you say is the most stumbling block when it comes to new markets and the peculiar issues that they face, and how to address them?
I think, when you are dealing with a new market, I think I mentioned this thing briefly before, that you need to understand the prioritization and sequencing. Okay. So that's why whenever we are dealing with a new market, roadmap is very important.
Roadmap.
Alright. So when you talk about roadmap is just like, it's not like you just coming out with a pathway, but more importantly, you do gap assessment, you do diagnostic, you analyze the strength and the weakness, and then you said, okay, this is what we are trying to achieve. The objective, the intent, is to achieve A, B, and C. But because we all have so-called limited resources, we have limitation, we have what we call as like you use the word roadblocks, challenges. So you need to understand that how you want to, create a pathway towards achieving your objective. So that's why it's very important that you deal with the problems with some experts, and generally, I'm not trying to promote ourselves, but this is where we come in and said, okay, let's do a diagnostic assessment, let's understand the challenges, let's gather feedbacks from the stakeholders, and understand what can be done and what cannot be done, and then create a roadmap so that the implementation of it follow a certain sequencing, right? So sequencing matters because financial system is an industry where it's very fragile, in the sense that if you make one mistakes, when you lose your confidence, for example, you establish an Islamic bank and then suddenly the Islamic bank fail. So people will have that in memory that, you see, we will never put our money in Islamic banks. Okay, but how do you build that confidence, trust? So this is important. So the regulator, when they give licensing, they must make sure that the bank have a viability to operate in the new environment, like for example following the Shariah rules, compliance, and so on and so forth. So it looks very simple on the surface that we just go on and establish something, but as a matter of fact, I think it's just more complex. But the short answer to your question is that do a proper gap assessment, understand the objective, do a roadmap, do prioritization, and eventually do sequencing, and then you can see that things will actually grow organically, inshallah.
Things will grow organically. And again, when we look at this jurisdiction, still looking at new markets, for example, standardization is one of those key things that you touch on briefly. And looking at one of your work on compliance and standardization, on compliance and Sharia governance, and also market discipline, one of your research work, looking at how standardization play a key role in helping to navigate new market. Would see that in some cases, some countries recognizes IOFI while they still have to battle with their own local Sharia boards. From your experience, in what role do those regulation, standardization in the area of Sharia, for example, what role do they play in helping to really move on, especially in regions where perhaps maybe they don't have a prototype that they are following in navigating such orders?
You see, people are emphasizing too much on standardization and harmonizations. People feel that once you have one rule that fits all, things gonna become a lot easier because you can communicate to each other. Everybody will speak the same language. People will understand. Okay, I use this law, you use this law, then we can actually operate. I mean, I'm not denying that. But we should not be really looking at too much of standardization and harmonizations as well.
Yeah.
So there must be a certain principle that we can agree on. And then we look at our own differences as a matter of strength because it fits some local context. But of course, when it comes to the international context, there must be a standard rules that everyone operates, So, and for that, we have IFSB, just like equivalent to Basel.
Yeah.
So the question is that whether people use IFSB, how extensive it is, So everyone is just keeping an excuse or this AUFI and IFRS and everything, but anyone have studied that what exactly, how far that they actually differ from each other? Actually the differences is not in what we call as so material in a such a way that if I use AUFI and you use IFRS and we are not able to deal with each other, there are certain treatment of the Islamic contracts that been treated differently in AUFI and compared to IFRS, but it doesn't mean that we cannot do business together. Alright, so I feel that this idea of harmonization and standardization eventually will happen gradually when the market gets larger and larger. Alright, so we should not be using this as an excuse to say that okay, we can't do this because we are just not the same. And I strongly believe that you need to give them time to evolve because different market is actually at a different stage of maturity.
Different stage of maturity.
Okay, so that's for me. I feel that we need to allow people to learn, to make mistakes, to adapt and to innovate and eventually give time for the industry to grow. Okay, Malaysia took more than 40 years to understand what is the best way to do Islamic finance, and yet it's not a perfect ecosystem yet. We still got a long way to improve where we are right now. So if you're expecting a country that only implement Islamic finance 5 to 10 years to get it right from the beginning, I think it's going to be a tall ask. Okay, so we should give people space to grow and make mistakes and eventually get it right over time.
Over time. That is very interesting. And looking at part of your journey on advising, the dilemma that revolves around it, has there been any time maybe when you were advising private or governments or even ministries or at the global level where you had to say we cannot move on this, where you said no to a specific project because of its contradiction, or it has always been an easy swim through?
No, we are always clear about what we can do and what we cannot do, but it doesn't mean that, everything is outright no at the beginning. We try to understand what can be done, what is the first options and what is the second option. So if the first option is not viable, then we propose the second options. If the client doesn't like the second options, then, we can't help it because we are the custodians of Shariah. Because we cannot compromise Shariah in the sense that people start questioning the integrity of our pronouncements. So if you just say yes to everything, then why you need us? Anybody can come and simply say, if someone is saying yes to everything, then means we can do whatever we want. So as I said at the beginning, there are certain lines that we will never cross. Okay. But at the same time, we do not want to become the obstacle for innovation. So we always trying to find a way to support and to facilitate. But there will be a point where you just cannot compromise anymore because it's a clear violation of the Sharia principles. So that point, we need to draw a line and say, this cannot be done.
Yeah.
You know, or if you want to continue doing this, then you need to basically create a different set of entity. Like this entity to do this and this entity to do this. And our Sharia pronouncement only applicable to this entity. Because this entity is clearly not following the Sharia principles.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are very clear on that. So yeah.
So if you are going to give a 3-step roadmap or 3-step playbook to maybe an upcoming market, for example, in setting out into the Islamic finance world of adoption or service delivery, what would be the 3-step you would want to give to somebody listening to this today?
I think first you must understand the market. The demand side must be very clear. You cannot make assumptions that the demand is there just because they are Muslims. It doesn't work that way. You need to clearly understand the demand side, because supply side, as long there is a viability in terms of selling the product, supply side automatically will happen. You know, any banks will be interested to do Islamic banking window or Islamic banking subsidiary because there is a demand side. You need to understand your market, number one. Number two, you need to very clear about the regulations. You know, so regulation is always the starting point. So you need to make sure that the law allow you to operate in the way that, you know, Islamic bank or Islamic finance can operate. I think that is very important. So understanding the limitation of your regulations and where to tweak your regulations is very critical. And number three, people ask me, this will never happen if there's no human elements. So you need a strong champion to make sure that Islamic finance can be successful. So we are lucky in Malaysia, people who come before us, many of them are passionate about Islamic finance. So you need a champions, because without champions, people will give up very quickly. But the champions who are passionate, who believe in this idea of Islamic finance, who are willing to make investment, like in the case of Malaysia, Central Bank willing to establish a university to make an investment, allow the ecosystem to grow. Okay, and so we were quite lucky in that sense. So we need more champions in other parts of the world. So people who are passionate about Islamic finance must step up and simply say, okay, this is what we want to do to free our system from ribawi, to allow Islamic Muslims to actually operate in halal financial sector. Because it's mandatory for them to operate for example, in the halal way, but we should not just be doing it because it's halal, we need it, but we also believe that this halal is actually good for the society and we can make a difference using our own way of doing a financial system. Okay, that I would probably say the 3 steps. So
looking at today and projecting into another 20 years, also putting side by side the prospect that you are currently handling right now and the momentum that you are seeing from different regions that are coming up, and those that are already in the pipeline that will be setting out to the market maybe in another 5 years. Where do you see Islamic advisory services going, and to what extent are they able to really drive Islamic financial service to the last mile?
Things are more challenging now at Islamic financial services because of the evolvement of the market. So we need to create a multi-layer of advisory. For the new entry, the second is for the middle entry, and the other one for the advanced entry.
Advanced market.
Because everyone require different form of advisory. So the way I see it is that in 20 years time, because we have learned so much about the past, so we can create what we call as a super intelligence agents, who have accumulation of all this knowledge in terms of understanding what need to be done at the entry level, at the middle level, and also at the advanced level. So I think people should be willing to share knowledge. Because when I talk about super intelligence, it can only happen when we bring all this information, all this experience in one place, so that we know the ABC of doing Islamic finance. So that there is a clear playbook of how things actually being done in the different market. So if the market is like this, these are the things that you should do. Okay, but of course, eventually we need human elements to process this recommendation by so-called the super intelligence agent, right? So we want to make things more like fluid and simple and dynamic in such a way that people have the knowledge in front of them, and they just need to know how to use the knowledge and implement the right policies.
The right knowledge, implementing the right policies. Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Iskandar Shah Mohammed Rashid, the CEO of ISRA Associate. Thank you very much. And that has been the bottom line. And when we are looking at the dilemma that is faced by the advisory institutions, the bottom line still remains that the fact that it is a Muslim majority country does not indicate that the market is there. It is about the readiness of the consumer. Are they aware of the product? Are they interested in the product? Is it driving values? And do you have the right regulation support from the government? And all of these are very key to driving that service to the last mile. And most of the time, as mentioned by Doctor, the issue of standardization is not merely a conversation of just harmonizing. It is a conversation that might be necessary, not just for today, but looking into the future, we can still work with what we have today. And again, as a three-step to any new market entrant, it is important for you to understand that, is there a market for you? Do you have a regulation? And do you have the right champions to drive it to the last mile? That has been the Bismillah podcast today by Adil Advisory. I'm your host once again, AbdulAkeem Akinbode. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.